I did fail my videos actually the first time round. That was quite scary. It was kind of very worrying and I was very upset. But actually, weirdly, at that point, it was a coaching session that I had with a friend who was doing an ILM5 coaching and she needed to get her coaching hours up. I said, I'm up for coaching. I'm sort of a threshold here. I'm unsure what to do. And it was probably the most transformative bit in terms of setting up my portfolio career. And basically, it felt having the coaching, it allowed me to say yes to things, which is an interesting concept. Basically, I'd been saying no to things. I didn't even apply for things because I'd preempt all that bit and go, A, I won't get it, and B, if I get it, how am I going to fit it into my life? What's going to happen? How will I tell the partners that I need this job and that, they need to change my hours? By the time the job came around and went, I didn't even apply for it because I'd already talked myself out of it because I thought, well, what's the point? And the coaching taught me to say, well, what's the worst that could happen if you applied for it and they offered it to you? And it made me think about why I was stopping myself applying for those roles. I could say no to the roles if they were offered and they were not right for me, but I didn't even go that first step in most cases. And it actually just made me understand I need to try things to understand what needs to be in or out of my portfolio.
What was in your mind to think, I'd like to become head of school GP training one day?
Okay, that was never in my mind. I don't think I knew that obviously as a trainer, you go to all the conferences and you know the heads of schools and you know your local VTS team and your training program directors and the associate deans around them. So I sort of knew the setup. I was very active in my trainers group.
My guest today is Dr. Manjiri Bodhe. She's head of school of GP training and portfolio GP. Hi Manjiri, how are you doing?
Hi, it's really lovely to see you today and thank you for inviting me.
Great. Today we're going to dive into portfolio career GP training. So for people who might not know you, could you please introduce yourself, please?
So I'm Manjiri. I'm a GP. I qualified in 2001 as a GP. So before the days of the compulsory MRCGP. So I've been a GP for over 20 years now. Have been pretty much everything under the sun in terms of a type of GP. I was a locum to start with, became salaried. I was a partner for then 11 years. Subsequent to that, being salaried, and then during that time gone into medical education. And now I don't do that much GP work, sort of just finished a salaried job in May and sort of looking for a bit of locum work to keep up to date and keep on the performers list. So kind of that's where I am at the moment.
Great. So tell us, how did you develop your career in the beginning?
When I started general practice, the VTS schemes were still, the GP training programs were available, but you didn't have to go through them to become a GP. You could join in the last year and do general practice training for a year in a practice. So originally I wanted to be a paediatrician and I thought about doing peds. I did a year and a half of peds. I think I sat the first part of the paediatric exam. I didn't get through that. And then thinking about career pathways, the amount of consultant posts and sort of training posts were few and far between in those days, particularly in peds. And it was, you'd have to travel around and find a post. And to be fair, I don't think I was that keen on doing that. I kind of had travelled around the countries to come to the UK and sort of was fed up of doing that at junior doctor level and sort of felt I wanted to kind of stay somewhere and get embedded somewhere. So I decided to do general practice. My paediatric consultant was brilliant. So I'd go off and do a week of GP and see if you like it and managed to get me a work experience. And actually you saw so many children in general practice. I thought I'm not going to miss out if I don't do peds. And that's how I went into general practice. So I made up my own VTS scheme in essence. I'd done year and a half of peds, so doing neonates and general peds. I did psychiatry for 6 months. I did A&E. And then came into general practice and did a year of general practice in a local surgery. And in those days, you sat and you had an interview with all the different partners. So it was very, very different. But it wasn't very dissimilar to what it is now. There weren't very many GPs at the time, GP trainees. So actually, you had a pick of the ones you wanted to go to. So actually, I ended up choosing a partnership where the GP trainer who interviewed me, I sort of had a really good feeling about him and we got on really well and we were on the same wavelength and I felt, oh, he's going to be a really good trainer and he was. And I really enjoyed my time doing that year. That's how I came into general practice.
Especially we're seeing a lot of burnout in general practice right now. Can you tell me your own experience as in how you actually develop some resilience when things get hard?
Yeah, so if I talk about my own experience, I mean, I've never been a super academic doctor, I would say. I'm bright, and I pick up things quickly, and I have, or used to have, a photographic memory. So there were certain things that came easy to me. But medicine in itself wasn't really an easy thing. I was just really good at science. And I possibly think a lot of people of my generation, it maybe wasn't a calling. It was you're good at this, you're pigeonholed into this. And certainly coming from an Indian background, that was pretty much, what choices you had were you go into medicine, law, or engineering, something professional. And that was the expectation. I mean, my first love was English and writing. So I was very good at writing, but actually the science bit and the understanding the academic research didn't come that easy to me. So in that year of training, it was hard. Even in that stage, I would say. But the trainer was someone who could help guide you and look at where your areas of weaknesses and your strengths were, and try to push you towards looking at those weaknesses and working on those, rather than continuously doing the bits that you do well, which all of us naturally gravitate to. And we go, we like that, it's easy for us, let's do that bit. And actually, it's more difficult to work on the bits that you find harder. And so a lot of it was trying to be systematic about the areas I didn't like, and so therefore tried to ignore. I was very good at communication and sort of doing that bit, and actually the clinical knowledge I had to be a lot more structured with, and had to take advice from my trainer. And in those days, the MRCGP wasn't a compulsory exit exam. It was a post. You could do it whilst you were doing your other exams for general practice, or you could do it post general practice. And a lot of us did it at the same time. And so it was quite useful, because we were doing kind of work for a summative assessment, as it was called then. It was similar. You had an MCQ and you had to do videos, and you had to submit videos. So so the trainer was pivotal in helping that. But the other thing that happened was I did fail my videos, actually, the first time round. And that was quite scary. And it was kind of very worrying, and I was very upset, and sort of I didn't know what would happen. And I had a visit from one of the senior educators at the time to go through what had happened and what I needed to do, and talk me through what I needed to do, and gave me an extra 3 months of training at the time. And I was really upset. But at the end of the day, I sort of thought to myself, after the initial upset and being really worried, I knew I could do it. I knew I was capable. And so therefore, it was just working with my trainer on the areas that they'd flagged up that were the bits that I had to work on. So we tried to do the videos and focus on those areas, rather than everything else that was all fine and I was good with. And actually, a lot of that you pick up as you become a GP. So we worked on that, and then luckily I managed to get through. It did impact on my job, because I was supposed to cover a maternity leave as I finished in the August, and I had to. It was all really difficult, because I had to ring them up and say, I'm really sorry I failed the job. And I was worried they'd say, well, you can't come in. And they didn't. And they said, that's okay, we'll get someone else for a couple of months, and we do want you, and we want you to start when you finish. So tell us the date that you're due to finish, and then we can take you from there. So actually, I think a lot of the things that we do or say, we build up in our heads about what someone might actually say or what they might think, when actually we don't know. That's our biases and what we think might happen. And so actually a lot of it is actually just discussing it calmly and thinking about strategies of how you'll overcome that hump that you're in, and walk back up that mountain and get to the top. And I managed to do that. And I've had several times during my life where that has happened. It's not the first time. So I think maybe that helped me with my resilience, that I'd gone through things that are difficult and been able to I can come out the other end of it.
That's very interesting. I'm seeing a lot of GP trainees who are struggling with the new SE exam, and it has such a major consequence on the training, and especially some of the IMGs who have a visa restriction as well. Have you seen any issues as well coming more with this new exam?
We've only had two iterations of it at the moment, so it's difficult to get very clear reports. The RCGP do produce some reports on the pass rate, and there's still a bit of a differential with international medical graduates. I think it's been really, really difficult looking back, and we've done a lot of work. A lot of the deaneries are doing work on differential attainment as a whole, and that includes GPs who are IMGs and GPs with physical or mental health problems, which might affect exam success, and things like neurodiversity. But obviously the international medical graduates, or those with primary medical qualifications from another country, that's the key bit. are the ones that a lot of the focus is on, because it feels the numbers of those trainees are increasing proportionately to UK graduates. However, it's the interesting bit is it's not just those with PMQs from another country. It's also BAME graduates from the UK. So they studied in the UK, done their degrees in the UK, and they still have a lower pass rate historically when you look at the CSA exams and the AKTs to white UK graduates. So I think it's been really difficult. There's so many of us in this that have really tried to understand what are the things that might be affecting graduates' chances. And I don't think it's one single thing. I mean, I think there's been a lot of focus on the exam, and obviously there will continue to be focus on the RCGP exams. But it isn't just about the exams, it's about WPBA. And as they go through the portfolio, there are lots of difficulties for some trainees passing the portfolio and doing a number of things. And I don't think we know clearly. There is obviously an issue around cultural understanding, and particularly for the SCA exam, things around communication. You're doing that communication with UK patients, and obviously that's a diverse group, and there are many, many different types of patients. But that can be quite difficult for someone brand new to the UK. I mean, I came to the UK when I was 16 from India. However, I've lived in and out of the UK over that time, and my stepmother was British. So I think I got exposed every 2 years. I would come to the UK, and my dad lived in the UK. So I had a good understanding of some of the cultural aspects of the UK, you know, the humour, when they say something, what do they actually mean? How they might say something very different to how in India we might say something. Humour particularly, and understanding the meaning of phrases is completely different in some countries. And with British diction and understanding, what we say isn't what we mean quite often. And that is a huge problem, because in a lot of other countries, what you say is what you mean, and you're very honest about that, and it's quite straightforward. And that is not the case in Britain. And I think some other Western countries are similar, but I think Britain is quite unique in some sense. And so I absolutely empathise with the difficulty. I mean, I came over when I was 16, and I was still very aware of my accent and certain things that I would say, and I wouldn't understand certain jokes. But it didn't take me as long to accommodate and acclimatise, because I sort of had a bit more of an understanding of the UK, having been in and out of it. But if you have come to the UK, you're fairly new, you might have only worked one job, you might have literally come in 2 weeks before, expecting someone to to go through the training program and do everything that actually our other UK graduates have had years to acclimatise to is really, really difficult. And I don't think that's easy at all. And some people will find it easier than others. And that is totally down to where they were brought up, how they were brought up. Some people have been to international schools, some have been to regional schools in their countries. So it's very different in each setting. And so we can't expect, not all our IMGs can be gathered into one sort of homogenous group, because they're not. However, I think we can say that there's some commonalities that IMGs might face in terms of difficulties, and try and work with those and sort of help them get over those, and try and get to the best outcome that we can. And actually, some people do need extra time, whether they're a UK graduate or an IMG, but I needed it, and that's what I needed. So I don't think we can put everyone into one group and say this is what we need to do. But I do think we need to sort of start thinking about what kind of help each person might need. And if there's some upskilling to do with our trainers, for example, and the educators around, that's what we're trying to do, is help people understand different cultures, make it more explicit about how we talk and how we communicate, get some of that language and cultural sort of understanding into our programs, actually. And everyone should have that. I think it's useful for UK graduates to understand why the Brits do what they do. If so many of them are going abroad to work, it might actually serve them well. We don't want them to go abroad to work, but it's a good global understanding. It's global, workforce now, and so we do have to understand that it's useful to know how other people think and work and do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuances that you have explained here, and it is very easy to come to a conclusion when every GP trainee has got individual needs. Tell us about your roles as in developing a new portfolio role after becoming a GP, Manjiri?
I think as soon as I qualified as a GP, I think because of the relationship I had with my trainer, I really enjoyed working with my trainer and looking at what he did, how he got me to get interested in doing certain things or exposed me to a wider bit of general practice. And I sort of thought to myself, well, I think I'd like to be a trainer as well. I think that would be really interesting. And my trainer was sort of like my informal mentor in the background. And sort of when I was looking for jobs and trying to think about what I would do, I would call him. So I could see that as being a role, and that's what you could do going forward. So I thought about education, and it was something I wanted to do. However, I was in a post where I was a locum, and then I became a salaried. It was when salaried jobs were very few and far between, and I basically made up my own salaried post. I was trying to see whether the practice we were in could become a training practice, but it was in a difficult situation with not enough partners and not enough doctors, and it just wasn't at that point in time wasn't a possibility. And then I worked there for about 4 or 5 years, and then I was looking for partnership posts in the last year and a half of that role. The place that I was at did offer me a partnership, but I didn't think it was a stable enough practice for me to be a partner in. I didn't feel it would be a safe place for me to be a partner in. So I looked for partnerships, and actually, by perchance, my old training practice was advertising for a part-time partner. And part of that was they wanted whoever was the partner to come in to become a trainer. And the reason was few of the other partners hadn't done their MRCGP, and the senior partner at some point was going to retire. So they kind of were doing some succession planning and wanted, some new blood in the practice. Worked out really well. They wanted someone for 3 days a week, and that was part of the agreement with that practice, that if I was appointed, then I would work to become a trainer. So that's what happened. I started. I got pregnant quite soon after I started with the practice, so I then went on maternity leave, so I had to put on hold the training. But as soon as I came back from maternity leave, I basically went on to the trainer's course. At the time in Oxford, we had to do a PG cert. It was now Thames Valley, it was called Oxford Deanery. So you had to do a PG cert, and it lasted about 9 months. You had 3 modules that you had to go away and lodge and do, and then you had to do the work in between. So I did all that, and then finally became a partner. I got partner and trainer, got a foundation trainee as my first trainee, I remember, and then subsequently got that same trainee as an ST trainee going forward. So I convinced her to go for general practice. I think she was thinking about psychiatry or general practice, and I said, you should do general practice. And I really enjoyed that. And so I got a plethora of trainees, some ST3, some ST1, some ST2s. So I did that for a long, long time, had my second child, and then it was starting to change. We got a few new partners in, but we were starting to see when advertising drop-offs in the number of people applying, the sorts of people applying. The work was starting to change and get really, really stressful. And I've been thinking for about a year or two, should I leave the partnership and become a locum? And obviously a busy family life and all the other things that kind of come in. It's quite stressful being a partner, and certainly at the moment, I'm no doubt that it's the most stressful time it's been, but it's always stressful being a partner. But I could see a shift from what was to what it has started becoming now. And it took me over a year and a half in the end to sort of make that decision. In fact, it ended up being several partners in our practice resigned all at the same time. So I had to wait for 9 months to actually go, which was kind of a difficult time in the end. But it was the right decision for me at that point. And then I'd sort of been thinking about medical education whilst I'd been a partner, but it was quite restrictive because we'd made some rules as a partner, which all of us had to stick to ensure the partnership was running smoothly. And it meant it was very difficult to take on other portfolios because you couldn't change days or sessions, etc. So once I was out of the partnership, it sort of opened up that flexibility for me. And certainly going into a salaried role meant that I knew that I wouldn't need to stay there forever. I could take up portfolio roles, I could apply for them, and I could start the process. But actually, weirdly, at that point, it was a coaching session that I had with a friend who was doing an ILM5 coaching. and she needed to get her coaching hours up. So I said, "Oh, I'm up for coaching. I'm sort of at a kind of a threshold here. I'm sort of unsure what to do." And it was probably the most transformative bit in terms of setting up my portfolio career. And basically, it felt having the coaching, it allowed me to say yes to things, which is an interesting concept. Basically, I'd been saying no to things. I didn't even apply for things because I'd preempt all that bit and go, oh, well, I won't get it. And B, if I get it, how am I going to fit it into my life? What's going to happen? How will I tell the partners that I need this job and that, they need to change my hours, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time the job came around and went, I didn't even apply for it because I'd already talked myself out of it because I thought, well, what's the point? And the coaching taught me to say, well, what's the worst that could happen if you applied for it and they offered it to you? And it made me think about why I was stopping myself applying for those roles. I could say no to the roles if they were offered and they were not right for me, but I didn't even go that first step in most cases. And it actually just made me understand I need to try things to understand what needs to be in or out of my portfolio. So that was kind of the very first step into thinking, yep, I need to do things other than training and general practice. So that opened me up a little bit.
That's fascinating. So it looks to me that there have been quite a lot of struggle before you started, and the breakthrough you got was from coaching. Was there anything in particular that allowed you to break that belief that you couldn't get it, or what was it exactly in that activity where you were being coached?
I think the key bit was the challenging questions that the coach posed to me in a nice, safe environment, obviously, and she asked permission. She said, I'm going to be questioning you a little bit and maybe digging a bit deeper, and you might feel uncomfortable with some of the stuff. And is that okay to do? And I said, yes. And actually, the key question, I remember trying to get the salaried role and asking for time off because it was very soon after I started the salaried role, and it was really to do a coaching course. And I thought about this course for a while. Hadn't applied for it at that point, but I thought about it and I knew which one it was, and I had the money, and I thought, right, I should be doing it, but I hadn't applied for it. And the reason was I was a bit worried because I thought, well, I've only just started, I won't get the time off, so therefore I shouldn't ask for it, so therefore I shouldn't do the course. And actually, what the coach sort of went into is asking me the question, well, why do you think you won't get the time off? And what stops you from asking for it? And why do you think you're worried about it? And so just kept digging and digging. And in the end, I think it came down to I might not have a job. So what do I do then? Because it was the first time after 11 years I was out of that safe environment and I was out in the job market. And she said, and so she just pushed me to say, well, if you don't get that job, what things can you do? What is there for you? And actually, I listed off quite a few places that had offered me roles, and I sort of put them to the back of my mind. So she said, actually, there are other options if that practice doesn't give you a job. You can go somewhere else. You can locum. You've got 2 other salaried positions. You might have to make some other compromises, but there are other roles. And it's odd. It's odd that you don't have those thought processes yourself, that you think that as rational, medics, we would have those, but we don't because life gets in the way. So it was just that systematic challenging to say, but why are you doing this? Why are you feeling this? What is stopping you? What are your options? And just making me say them out aloud and list them. That light bulb moment at the end of it came, well, I don't need to be afraid because actually there are options. And if this one doesn't pan out, another will. But actually, that course was really important to me. And I should be going for it and I should be doing it because it is part of my career plan. And that is the best thing that happened to me. That sort of transformed my entire career, really, and how I looked at my career and how happy I felt in my career. I think that's really important. So, yeah, that's what it did for me. It just gave me the clarity of thought into why and what I do. And it's lasted from that point in 2016. It has now lasted. Whenever I apply for things or I want to do things, I go through that thought process again myself. Now I can do it. And then I come to a conclusion which fits what I want to do. So
that's great to hear. So I find like coaching is a very powerful way of acting as a catalyst in somebody's career. And it looks like you've benefited from it. I have benefited from it as well. And then I know that you went on to become a coach then.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my ILM 5 at Oxford Brookes for just under a year it was.
Are you feeling anxious about the SCA preparation? Maybe you're not getting constructive feedback, you don't know whether you're doing the right thing. If you're looking for one-to-one support, I'd love to help you. Click the link down the description below to book a call with me to see how I can help you to pass your exam.
It was a mixed coaching program. It wasn't just medics. It was open to everyone. And I found that quite useful because I mixed with such a diverse group of people. There were teachers, social workers, corporate salespeople, marketing, executives. And so the breadth of connections that I made were immense. And also getting that viewpoint from people not in public services is really, really mind-blowing, because I think you get ingrained into a way of thinking when you work in things like education or health. And I still have those connections now. And in fact, I connected with one of the people that I did the coaching with. And for 3-4 years, we met regularly as we were setting up our businesses. And it was so useful just to sound out things to someone completely unrelated to your business, but who understands. And so, yeah, it was one of the best things I did. And I set up my coaching business privately, sort of was doing coaching sort of face to face, and then subsequently a bit online. So it transformed, I think, me as a person, because obviously it added to my portfolio, but I think it transformed how I spoke to patients, how I trained. So I was still training at that point in the salaried practice that I was at. So it transformed my conversations with my trainees and how I approached that. So it transformed how I was at home a little bit, as much as you can with children, but it sort of allowed me to see things differently. So I use it day to day. It's not just to do it for business or if you want to become a formal coach. It is something that I think as a medic, it sort of transforms every bit of your job and life that you do. So yeah, it was one of the best things I could have ever done, I think, that year that I understood. It was a blessing in disguise. I was going to do it under the NHS Leadership Academy. At that point, they had been offering free coaching, ILM 5 coaching courses. And then you offered your services for a set number of years for free to pay back the course. But at that point, when I approached them, they had so many coaches that weren't being used that they had stopped offering the coaching qualification. And so it kind of was a blessing in disguise. It made me look out to what else is on offer. And what I needed, from a course. And actually, I think I benefited from having a mixed cohort really with me, I think. So, yeah.
That's great. So it looks like you started your independent coaching activity. And what type of people do you like to coach, Manjiri?
I don't think there's any person I like to coach. I'm willing to coach anyone. I think the type of people that end up coming to me are quite often professionals, mid-career often. So kind of often between the ages of maybe 30, 35 to 50, 55, like somewhere like that. So often they've done a career or a job for a certain number of years, and they're sort of at that point in their lives, personally and professionally, where they're wanting to change things or things are changing around them and they're sort of a little bit confused about where to go. Often women, I think women have historically just had a lot to juggle because of families. If you put in families or caring for older parents, etc., often women take the burden of those jobs disproportionately. And so their careers are difficult because they have to work around all these other things. So often it's more difficult for them to understand how they set up their career. So often it's women, but it's not only women. And so those are the sorts of people. And it's often related to careers, but your career is part of your home life, as part of your personal life. So actually everything bleeds into one another. So what's happening at home will affect what you're doing at work and vice versa. So you can't separate the two. I think you have to bring in people's feelings and emotions and what's going on in their lives into that. But coaching is not for someone if you're unwell. So if you're mentally or physically unwell and therefore not in the right state of mind to accept coaching, you need to get those areas sort of looked at and get a counsellor or a therapist to sort of do that work first and then come to a coach. But coaching is really, really useful where you're at a time where you're unsure about things, or you're maybe hearing people saying things and it doesn't align with what you want. So sometimes having that clarity of thought can be really good.
Then you became a coach, and with the medical education, you carried on to pursue that. Tell us a bit more about what went in your mind to think, I'd like to become head of school GP training one day.
Okay, that was never in my mind. I don't think I knew that obviously as a trainer, you go to all the conferences and you know the heads of schools and you know your local VTS team and your training program directors and the associate deans around them. So I sort of knew the setup. I was very active in my trainers group. We have and still have a fantastic trainers group where I was in. And it was very active and everyone was really enthusiastic, and that rubbed off on new trainers. But the one thing I did do was when myself and quite a few of us, my friends, we started as new trainers in that group. And what we found was we were asking some basic questions, which we thought would be a bit boring for the trainers that were really experienced and sort of had been there for a while. And it was felt that we should have a breakout group of our own, like a new trainers group, where for the first 5 years of your training, you could be in that group, ask the silly questions to someone who was maybe had been through that a year or two ago. And also then you could be allocated a mentor from the experienced trainers group. So you'd have the benefit of both. So you'd still attend the main group, but you'd be in a more smaller new trainers group where some of the basic operational stuff you could do without feeling like you were imposing on the wider trainers group. And so we set this group up and it's still running and it was fantastic. So we had this new trainers group and a bigger trainers group, very enthusiastic group. And so I loved it. And they appointed a chair of the trainers group every 3 years or something like that, 2 or 3 years, to sort of just make sure that it was running smoothly and work with the training program directors. So I did that for a couple of years as well. And I just loved it. I loved the organisational bit and I liked herding people together and working out what they wanted and thinking about the program and are we doing what we need to do, for our trainers. I'd always thought about becoming a training program director, as I thought that was the way in. And I missed the opportunity whilst I was still a partner. That was the bit where I thought, oh, I won't be able to change my hours. I won't be able to change my days. There's no point applying. Never applied for the role. And so missed out on that role. And then subsequently, there was an associate dean job that came up for a different area. And at first I sort of thought to myself, oh, gosh, I really want to go into medical education. I know these jobs are here, but I haven't done a program director role. So how will I become an associate dean? You need to do that before you become. But I didn't stop there. I'd already been doing some visits and stuff as a trainer. So I'd entered that route. I just started helping out, doing visits, being a team leader for the visits, for approvals. So I spoke to the head of school at the time, the dean at the time, because I thought, well, there's no point just ruling myself out. By then I'd had the coaching, so I could work my way through it a little bit. And I sort of asked him, I said, look, I've not done any TPD stuff. I've only done these visits. You obviously know me. I'm doing the visits with you, but I haven't done anything else. Do you think I should apply for these roles? And he categorically said, yes, you should. He said, it doesn't matter that you haven't done it. You will need to speak to people and get an understanding of some of the things that will happen and speak to some of the associate deans who are working at the moment, so you get an idea. But I would apply for them. There's no reason, that you can't be successful. It'll be a steep learning curve, but that's what it is. And that's what I did. I got a bit of background info, spoke to some relevant people in my training area and outside, found out what they do. And I kind of like the sound of what they did. There was some operational stuff, so you're still involved with trainers, but there was a lot of strategy involved, which I like the thought of, planning things. What do you think we're going to be in 2 years' time or 3 years' time? So I applied for the role and I got the AD role, which covered the Oxford patch, but also covered the whole of the approvals and the out of hours process. So there was a deanery-wide role. And I was doing 3 sessions. So I ended up doing 3 sessions as a GP and 3 sessions doing this role, so 6 in total. And I loved that role. I was given a bit of free rein to revamp things because they'd things hadn't been quite working as well as they could have. And so I was given free rein to kind of look at how I could revamp it all. And that was really, it felt really good to be able to design something and work out what's practical, what do the trainers want, how to make it easy for everyone to undergo this process. And I did that then for a year and a half, I think. So that was 2018 when I started that. So that's sort of my way in. So I didn't go the normal route. I didn't kind of do the TPD bit and then go to the AD bit. And it was a steep learning curve, I will absolutely admit. I think I might have got some things wrong. But what I will say is I did not hesitate to ask anyone anything. I just asked away, and they probably got irritated with me. But I thought if I don't ask, I don't know, A, what has already happened. Am I reinventing wheels? Don't want to do that. And B, if I ask, I'll know about people that I wouldn't necessarily know about. And certainly the people that I was working with, other people had worked with them before and would have more insight. And so it was about finding out about people and relationships and how things work. And so that was what happened for me to go into that side of medical education. The bit about head of school was a bit sort of just came out of the blue because the dean at the time was retiring. And one of the other associate deans, who was very, very experienced and absolutely fantastic guy, and we all tried to emulate him. He was calm, really great at being a trainer, but also fantastic with his strategy and how he came to meetings. And everyone thought he was the one that was going to go for it. And we kind of expected him to get it. And we were very ready for it. He was, absolutely the person to get the role. And then he dropped us a bombshell that actually he was leaving medical education because he was doing work outside of that, and they'd offered him some posts, and that was the direction he was going in. And we were all totally and utterly gutted because A, he was a fantastic educator, but B, we were sort of in shock and thinking, oh gosh, who else, is going to do this? And I think what actually happened is the dean kind of spoke to all of us and said, are any of you interested? And none of us put our hand up because we all felt we were too green around the gills. I'd certainly only been there for a year and a half, so I didn't feel anywhere ready. But effectively what happened is everyone stepped back and I was left at the front. So they kind of gave me a little push, and I was like, oh my God, no, absolutely not. It's not a role I can do. It's quite a senior role. It feels unmanageable, and I didn't really know what it involved. So unless you actually do it, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that none of us really are, privy to. But in the end, I think a lot of people had a chat with me, and I had a chat to the dean, and in the end they said, I think you can do it. It's going to be tricky, but you've probably got the skills in terms of the skills, A, that you've developed, and B, some of your natural skills. And any skills you don't have, you will be able to develop, and we will help you with that. And so in the end, with my coaching hat on, with the fact that I'd been coached into thinking, is this something I could do and I could get good at? Yes, probably. Am I good at it now? No. Do I have the people around me that can help me be good at it? Absolutely, yes. The team was fantastic. And is there a good wider national team of people that is going to help you? Yeah, I knew that. I'd met some of them. They were amazing. So in the end, that bit of take the leap into the unknown that I'd sort of started that journey kind of took me to it. And I kind of started, I took the role. I got it. I applied for it. I had to do a lot of legwork because I needed to understand what the role involves. So I spoke to a lot of people before my interview and read up a lot of stuff about HE as it was at the time. Yeah, and then went for the interview and was successful. So kind of happened serendipitously, not really what I was aiming for, maybe in 10 years' time or something. But in the end, it came about, and I'm really happy it did, actually. I am. I've really enjoyed working as head of school.
That's great. So if you had to pick top 3 things that you've learned in that role, can you share with us what were the learning?
So top 3 things is collaboration, always. That's the top. I think I'm a collaborative leader. I think you need to work with other people. You need to understand who you're working for, what their needs are, and then the organization that you work for, what their needs are, and what you have to do to amalgamate those two. So people around you are very, very important. And so that's one thing. I think compassion and empathy as a second combined. I think you have to understand other people's viewpoint. You may be doing something that they don't want you to do. So that is difficult, but you have to understand where they're coming from so that when you deliver that information, it can be in a way that, is with empathy, and they feel like they've been heard. That's important, really. And then the third thing is learning, really, that you never stop learning in these roles. I think if you at any point think I know everything that I need to know, that's when you're in hot water, really, because you never do. And there's always something new coming out that you need to learn about, and someone else will know about it. And so it's getting the right people to talk to you about it or looking something up. I mean, Google is my best friend. And talking to people maybe further out from you nationally, who might have some understanding of it that you don't. So learning is an ongoing process, I think, even as someone in a leadership role. And things change, as we know, in the NHS quite rapidly. So as a medic, we know this, the guidelines change at the drop of a hat. So yeah, just marrying up those things, you have to be constantly on your toes, I think, and learning new things.
That's great. So you mentioned about the planning and strategic planning. So there's been a lot of changes in general practice. Post-COVID, we've seen a lot of things that we've never expect to happen. It's a time where we're training so many GPs, but at the same time, there's also a lot of GPs leaving as well. So where do you see things going?
I think it's a very, very difficult time for general practice. I think there's no doubt about it. I think the systems that we work under are really, really difficult now. So obviously, even pre-pandemic, I remember in 2019, there were real worries about winter pressures, A&E crumbling, general practices unable to cope with demand. And actually, at that point, people had already started leaving general practice. And a few practices have started handing back contracts or merging with other practices because they were down to one person in the practice. So that process had started. I think we had a little bit of a sort of a halo effect of that little bit of time in the pandemic, in that everyone stayed at home. No one went to see their GP. No one went to A&E. They managed things at home. But then post that, obviously the outcome of all of that is they weren't managing things at home. It had just been put on hold. And it all came out post-pandemic. And actually the numbers of people coming in to see GPs and A&E started rising incrementally, in addition to then having to deal with all the different variants of COVID coming out, COVID vaccinations, which general practice did amazingly well. I mean, I can't even tell you how great general practice was at delivering COVID along with flu at that time, and all other vaccination programs for children, for example. So we did an amazing job, but it took its toll because they were doing that. We were also seeing increasing numbers of patients. And to add to that, then secondary care delays meant that patients were coming back and forth to us trying to get help, which obviously at some point, primary care can't help any further. I mean, you can't keep giving stronger and stronger drugs for a problem that cannot be solved by medication. So it started crumbling before pandemic, but post-pandemic, obviously, it's become much, much worse. And I think what has happened is all of that has combined into the people working in it. So our younger GPs, particularly, that CCT'd over that period of time or just before the pandemic, the cost of living crisis and the cost of just being a human being, let alone being a medic, which actually adds to the cost, is immense now. And it's not just us struggling, everyone is struggling. And obviously, doctors are paid relatively well when you compare it to the average pay in the UK. But in terms of what doctors have to do to get to that point, especially as a trainee, is really immense, actually. A lot of exams. If you don't pass first time, you're paying every time you sit for an exam. You're very likely paying for lots of courses. Obviously, we have study leave that covers some of those, and we have a lot of stuff that deaneries offer for support. But there's still lots of things that doctors have to do in terms of keeping up to date and keeping in time. And to add to that, they have families and dependents. And so that's newer doctors are finding it quite difficult. Doctors in their mid-careers are finding it really, really difficult because they've been through times when it was not that bad and they have had that slow burn. It's like the boiling frog kind of scenario where, they thought it will get better. It will get better. At some point, it's going to get better. And we've come to a point where actually we're not sure that it's going to get better. And they're having to make difficult decisions because with the cost of living crisis, they can't pay staff with no increase in money. They're not able to get staff because receptionists, for example, and admin staff are getting absolutely bullied and harassed by some members of the public, and so are leaving. And they get very minimum pay because the government doesn't pay that much for contracts for those kind of staff. I believe they can earn more in Aldi and Amazon warehouses. So, that's where some staff have gone. It's a really sad situation. And then the second bit of it is the new Rs roles, which were made to help plug the gap that the lack of GPs was doing. But actually, I think it's currently having a bit of an opposite effect due to some of the issues around how the payments work and the government's plans and how those plans have been implemented. So I don't think that was probably what was planned, but we've heard of some GPs getting made redundant now because the practices can't sustain the numbers, and GPs are possibly the most expensive types of staff that we have on the books. They are the most efficient, there's no doubt, in terms of actually seeing patients. But I think people are making really difficult decisions. If there's no money in the pot, who do we hire? So we are, I think, at that point where times are really difficult for GPs. And I would love to say that please stay here, don't go anywhere. But I don't think that is the case for most people. I think what can be helpful is doing portfolio careers. And I do think young GPs, that's what they are doing. They are doing a few sessions in the NHS, and they're topping up those sessions with either a little bit of out of hours, private work for private providers. Some people do aesthetics or dermatology or whatever specialty they might have been interested in. And so people are already now very new out of general practice doing these careers. So I don't think we have to tell newer general practitioners that portfolio careers is where it is. I think they've understood that. And there's a lot of us now in our mid-careers that are portfolio careers GPs. However, that has created an issue for the workforce, no doubt about it. In that we probably need triple the number of GPs that we historically did, triple or maybe quadruple the numbers to make up the numbers in terms of our population and the GPs needed for the population. And we're certainly not doing that. And overall, over 50% of our GPs are GPs with a primary medical qualification from another country. So, as you rightly said, a lot of GPs are going abroad. And actually, the evidence is that a lot of our IMG GPs who come in end up going abroad because actually for them, they don't have any ties to the UK apart from coming for a training program. So for them, it makes sense to go where they are treated properly and they've got job satisfaction, really. If you want a long career, that's what you need. And so they are going to Australia or Canada, New Zealand. I don't think the grass is always greener necessarily. It's different. And I think those countries have their own issues with general practice and recruiting general practitioners for certain areas in their country, for example. But we know that we are not in that top 2 or 3 places where people want to work as a GP. They all come and train here, but people don't necessarily want to work here. So it is a pretty bleak landscape at the moment in terms of general practice if you're coming in as a new GP or a early careers GP, in terms of doing a full-time role in general practice, which is what I did. And many of my contemporaries, I used to do 9 sessions in my practice. I couldn't even contemplate doing that now as a newly qualified GP. I don't think anyone does. Very few people do 9 sessions. I think most people are kind of doing about 6 sessions, which feels, about right to them if that's what they want to do. And lots are doing less than that. And as I said, mixing it up with other portfolio sessions. But yeah, it's quite a difficult time. And I think there's got to be a wholesale change in our systems for this to become attractive for people to stay and do general practice and safe. I think we've got to underline that this is not just about not wanting to work in general practice. I don't feel like working hard. This is about it being unsafe actually for patients and general practitioners working in the way that we've been working. It's not sustainable. And actually it's a detriment to our patients because we can't treat them properly if we don't have the time and energy to treat them properly. So absolutely. I think that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, so it's very sad because it's almost like UK is training GP for other countries.
Yes, that's an interesting question, isn't there? And it's a moral and ethical question. on the flip side, we could say we are taking qualified doctors from other countries. So the brain drain, we're taking, highly qualified doctors. Some of them have been doing specialties for years and then come and train as a GP. So we are morally and ethically being quite unethical about, advertising in other countries in a way to come to us to become a GP. And then the flip side of it is that ethically, we can also say we're using public funds to train GPs here who then go elsewhere. I think we need to think about it differently though now. And I think I was talking about the global workforce, and I think we need to think about the global workforce and how that works, rather than the old-fashioned way of thinking that we train up our own and put them into our own jobs, because I think that won't work as well going forwards. I think we have to sort of have that horrible managerial phrase, blue sky thinking, but really think laterally about how we want to structure our training programs, and what do we want to do post-training programs to encourage people to stay and, have thriving careers in the UK. This is important. If there's nothing for these new GPs, and that goes for UK trained GPs and IMG GPs who do their training programs here as well, we've got to encourage people that there's something good for them to stay. That's the key bit, isn't it? If there's something good for them to stay, they'll stay. It's as simple as that. And so thinking about post-CCT, linking, and I think our training hubs are trying to do that now. What kind of things are we offering post-CCT GPs for support, for mentoring, portfolio careers, giving them that career, sort of almost a really clear viewpoint about what their career looks like, so they can see it, they can have a goal and say, oh yeah, I get one session to mentor, I get another session to do sexual health or dermatology. I've got this set out and it feels a really good mix. And I think at the moment we've got the wherewithal, but we've got a difficult point in the NHS and funding, and it's proving very difficult for us to put this into place with where we are at the moment. It's that chicken and egg scenario. You need one to get the other, and which is first. So yeah, it's tricky times, but we need to think really, really out of the box now and think about what we can do to enable our young GPs to stay. We want them to stay. We want them to have thriving careers. We want them to be happy. We don't want them to be unhappy GPs working. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've talked about a lot of things today, and there's a lot of GP trainees who are listening to this, and I'm sure they'll find the insights and your experience very useful, especially when they're thinking about developing portfolio career. Tell us, what are the things that you've seen portfolio GPs, when they're developing a career, they may not be thinking it right, or they make mistakes that will end up costing them years of their life?
Yeah, so I think with portfolio GP, there's no one way to do this correctly. Some people fall into things, or an opportunity arises and then they take up that opportunity and they enjoy it. Other people already have a really clear view from quite early on that I'm really interested in this bit. That's what I want to do. I think what I always say to people is that plan, but be prepared for the plan to go awry, and have some backup information or things that you could or you can do. And I think the plan shouldn't be rigid, because life happens, things happen, and you may need to change what you think you might be doing. I think one of the things I would say to people is, if you're struggling with the thought process of what you want to do and how you want to do it, go and get some coaching. You can pay for coaching, obviously, people like myself and other private coaches. There's lots of GPs actually that now do coaching for various bits of your career. But there's also free coaching available through the NHS via the Leadership Academy. And sometimes all you need is a few sessions to get your head in the right place to make those decisions. So what I say to people is, it's good time spent doing that. Don't think, oh, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, because actually you'll save yourself time and energy by putting some time and energy into putting time in for yourself and reflecting. Always a good thing to do a little bit of care of yourself. And by that, I mean internal work. And that those are things that are like, go for counselling if you need it. Get some coaching if you're struggling with your career direction, and get it. And then that shouldn't be the only time you get it. keep thinking about it as you go through your career, pivotal times when you're at those threshold moments where you're not sure what to do. Think about going and having a discussion with a coach for a few sessions to talk it through. And it does make your pathway a lot clearer, and much easier to decide where you want to go. Be open to opportunities as well, because sometimes something that you thought might not be the thing that you're really interested in might end up being the thing you love the most. So I think keep an open mind. Don't close yourself off to opportunities. And always know that there is something around the corner for you, even though you think there might not.
That's great. I'm really enjoy our conversation. And is there anything that you'd like to say to people who've been listening up until now before we wrap up, Manjiri?
I just want to say I think general practice is still a fantastic career, and those of us in it doing lots of different work still don't regret coming into it. We still love it, and I think it's one of the most versatile medical jobs you can do. And so to our trainees, I would say don't despair if you feel like it's at the moment a little bit overwhelming in general practice. There will be positive things around the corner. We can't say when those will happen, but I think your qualifications and the things you learn being a GP are life skills, really, and communication skills, which will never leave you. You always have those. And so I think try and be positive. I always think about cup half full is always a better place to be, because you're more likely to come to solutions using that theory. So don't despair. There are going to be better things around the corner, I'm pretty sure. And hopefully I'll be one of those people helping with that. So.
Great. Thank you very much for watching up until the end. Let us know down in the comment section what will you take away from the interview. And we'll speak next time. Take care.